This ended up being his only Best Director nomination so far.
That's crazy to me. Like, it's so wild to me.
Yeah, he's making these incredible movies, and it's not happening. Hello, friends. I'm Anderson Marchak.
And I'm Ricardo Segura.
And we are the Panel Bros. Welcome to the panel.
Welcome to the panel.
All right. We are continuing with our breakdown of the filmography of the great Christopher Nolan.
Yup.
In Nolan we trust.
The GOAT, baby.
It's been quite the journey. We last left off with Interstellar.
Yes.
And the next one here, it was released July 21st of 2017. Today we are going to talk about Dunkirk.
Dunkirk, man, I saw this in IMAX, and what an experience that was.
Yeah. We're going to talk about this a little bit later on. I'm not a big war movie guy. I will be able to name some of the war movies that I really enjoy later on. But when I see a war movie, I'm not drawn to go to see it, so to speak. So this was going to be a situation of me supporting Nolan because I support Nolan, and I'm going to see whatever he makes, right?
Yeah, that's it.
So let's get started here.
Let's get in it.
Alrighty, so it is 1940, and it's the Battle of France. We have some Allied soldiers who have retreated to Dunkirk. We have Tommy, a young British soldier. He is the only survivor of a German attack. And at the beach, he finds thousands of troops awaiting evacuation, and he meets Gibson, who is burying a body. So they see each other there, and it's been pretty intense leading up to this moment here.
Yeah, it like the movie opens up. There's the way I viewed this movie, it felt like we were watching a 3-hour movie, but just the final act, because it opens very hot. Like, it just opens with gunfire and running and panic, and you're like, whoa, you know what I mean? You're seeing people get gunned down right away, and you're like, oh man. And like you said, he makes it to the beach, and he partners up with someone who's burying a body. But leading up to this point, it opens up just like that, and you're in it. It hits the ground running, literally.
Right. Some dive bombers attack, and the soldiers, they attempt to board a hospital ship by bringing a wounded man on a stretcher, but they're ordered off here.
Yep.
They hear the commander Bolton, who wants to rescue the troops, and the ship is sunk by dive bombers.
Yeah.
So Tommy saves one of the soldiers, Alex, and all three of them now, they're sent aboard a destroyer, but it ends up getting hit by a torpedo before it can leave. So Gibson saves Tommy and Alex from drowning, and now the three of them, they're forced to return to Dunkirk.
Yeah.
So we have some plot here. It's moving along.
Yeah, and it's interesting because at this point, his name is Gibson, right? The one that we find on the beach. Is that what his name was? It's
hard because everyone's wearing the same outfit, and
it's one thing we want to point out, that there's a lot going on. You barely hear any names. You there's a lot of chaos. But one of the three soldiers that we're following so far, he hasn't said a word yet. Like, he hasn't spoken up, and there's a reason for that. But it was very interesting because the moment we meet him, he's burying a body on the beach, and then there's just no word shared between the two. And I summed it up to just like, hey, they're in the middle of a war. There's no need for words. We know we're both in it. Here, you want some water? Here's some water. Oh, let's go get this guy on the ship. Let's go save this guy. But there hasn't been a word spoken, and I found it very interesting. I was like, oh, why hasn't this guy spoke at all? Like, at all? And we'll get into that.
Right. And we apologize ahead of time. We're going to be using the character names, but Nolan didn't use too many big names for this movie. They're recognizable actors, but for a lot of the leads at the time, these were guys that really didn't do too much at the time, and it was almost like he wanted to put a focus on the war and not the individuals in the
Yeah.
war in the movie in itself. He
Yeah,
wanted you to
that was my take.
he wanted you to focus on the action on the screen, not the, oh, I know that actor. So
Yeah.
with
Because
all
even they, as many of you people know, Tom Hardy's in this movie, but you don't see his face until the end of the
right,
movie. Like, he really wanted to focus on the scenes itself and the war itself. So a lot of these young soldiers were relatively unknown outside of one very popular one that we'll talk about. But majority
yeah,
of them were just relatively unknowns. I had no idea who they were. And again, there's very, very little dialogue in this movie. So sometimes it's hard to keep track of exactly who's who throughout. It is what it is.
yeah. So we have one mole available, uh, capable of embarking on deep draft ships, and the Navy gets civilian vessels in England that can get to the beach.
Yeah.
So in Weymouth, we have a civilian sailor, Dawson, and his son Peter. They set out on their boat, the Moonstone, and they don't let the Navy commandeer the ship.
Yeah.
We have a hand that joins them, a young man by the name of George, and he's joining them there. So they're crossing the English Channel, and they end up rescuing somebody, a soldier, from a wrecked ship. He's the sole survivor of an attack. This is Cillian Murphy, another
Yeah.
Nolan collaborator here.
Another Nolan mainstay, man.
Yeah. And realizing that Dawson is sailing for Dunkirk, the soldier demands that they turn back and tries to get control of the boat. And it's intense. In the scuffle,
Yeah.
George, the young man, he suffers a head injury that makes him blind.
Dude, it was rough. And I understand
Yeah.
the panic because he's just been through, like, Cillian Murphy's character is essentially going through a war, and he's traumatized right now. And he's desperately saying, like, where are you going? Like, we need to get out of here. Like, there's nothing we can do. And Mr. Dawson is made to the point, like, no, we're going to go. We're gonna help. And Cillian Murphy's character is like, with what? Do you have guns? Like, he's so paranoid, and I understand it. And he tries to take the wheel. And then poor George, man, it wasn't intentional. It was legitimately an accident, but he falls, he suffers a head injury, and he says those words. He goes, I can't see anything. And I was like, oh my goodness.
Right. It's an intense scene in the sense that the son keeps going down and running back up again to his father to tell
Yep.
him about the situation, but we don't see it at all.
No, we
just
don't.
we just hear him relaying the information. He's not doing good. The wound looks bad. I have to run this ship. Just handle him.
Yep.
Take care of your friend or whatever. And I don't know if he's going to make it. It's just a really intense situation. But for whatever reason, we're not seeing George. They're not showing George to us yet. So we have 3 Royal Air Force Spitfires. They're heading toward Dunkirk, and they're here to cover the evacuation. But they only have 1 hour of operation due to the fuel. The leader is shot down in a fight, and one of the pilots, Farrier, he gets command, even though the fuel gauge is shattered.
Yeah.
And he's while protecting a minesweeper from another bomber, the other Spitfire is hit by one of the pilots, and the pilot Collins is rescued by Moonstone. So that's what happens next year. So
again, Nolan's making a tense situation with Farrier because it's like, oh, he can't see his gauge. Like, his gauge for his gas is gone. So immediately, like, my fist clenched up, and I was like, oh my God, like, he's gonna be in the air doing dogfights and trying to take out as many people as he can. At the same time, he has no idea how much fuel he has left. And his buddy's like, hey, do you want to go back? He's like, no. I'm pretty sure it's just a gauge. And it's like, man, what a huge leap of faith to just be out there not flying blindly, but you have no idea. If you run out of fuel in the air, that's a wrap. Like, it's over. You're falling into the ocean. You're gonna be taken out.
So at this point, we start seeing just these intense scenes, just flashes, flashes, flashes. We're on the Moonstone, and Rylance is sitting there trying
Yep.
to, the boat, and then he's got Murphy who's acting up. We have George that bumped his head and he's blind now, and then we see we're shifting to Tom Hardy's plane where the fuel gauge is broken, and he's trying to do his thing, and we can barely understand what he's saying,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we have Collins, whose ship went into the water, and all we see him with the butt of the gun, just
Yep.
trying to like break open the cockpit, but he can't get out.
I was
And
freaking out. I was
the
that at
water,
that moment. I was freaking out.
the water's like slowly rising up, and he's just like this,
Yeah.
just head up, but it's really cool because he keeps trying, even though he has no idea if he's going to make it. He keeps trying, and the Moonstone comes by the small boat and ends up saving him by lifting the hatch open and rescuing him. So
Yeah, because Mr. Dawson was like, we need to make sure that pilot is alive. And his
right,
son is like, yeah, but there was no parachute. Like, he's probably dead. He's like, no, we have to check. And thank God he did, because he was alive. He just couldn't get out.
right.
And I'm telling you, like, there's so many scenes that are happening at the same time that are so tense. Like, there's just like, oh my God, are they going to make it? And I don't have an emotional connection to the characters, because again, they're just kind of thrown at you very quickly because you're in the middle of this war. But as the water was rising, I remember like panicking, like, oh my God, I can't imagine being in that situation. And luckily they came and they cracked it open from the top and saved them. But it's just a testament to the way Nolan was making this movie, because again, at the same time, we have all these scenes of just chaos, war, and tension happening, and you're just like, you can feel it, like you can feel it all at once.
We have Tommy, Alex, and Gibson. They find themselves with a regiment of soldiers, and they're hiding um, in this vessel here out on the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And it's outside the Allied perimeter, and they're waiting for the tide to rise so they can, I'm assuming, make their escape. And the Germans start shooting at the vessel they're on for target practice. And the bullet holes start coming in, and everyone's panicking. It's like, well, we have to shoot back. And they're just like, no, we have to stay quiet because they're just shooting at us for target practice. They don't think that we're in here. They don't know that we're in here or not.
Yep.
Alex, who wants to lighten the boat that they're on, accuses Gibson, who has stayed silent, of being a German spy.
Yeah. Again, he hasn't said a single word, and that's his fear. Is like, he's a German spy. He hasn't said anything. He's just trying to infiltrate and come with us. And there's a reason why he's not talking. And it's like, oh, like at that moment, I was like, oh, okay, so there's something going on here.
Right. And they're like arguing with each other because they're like, you think one guy's going to make a difference? And well, that guy that doesn't belong. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
he was like, the other guy was like, you better hope he does, because if he doesn't make a difference, you're going next. Like, there's a lot of confrontation right now happening because they don't want to die, and they're like, we need to get someone out there to take the heat, take the shot, and back them off. And it was like,
right.
No.
And we've seen him already at this point in the movie, but the person leading this charge is Harry Styles.
Styles,
yeah, making his film debut, pop star Harry Styles. So
I'll tell you what, man, if you'd have told me years and years before this movie that Christopher Nolan was going to make a war movie and he was going to cast Harry Styles, I'd have been like, you're crazy.
Nah,
but he did it.
He did it.
He said, yep.
So Gibson reveals that he's French, and he stole the identity of a dead British soldier he had buried, hoping to be rescued.
Yes.
And the group ends up leaving the boat behind because it begins to sink because of all the bullet holes that are entering it. And they're obviously engaged in a situation of shooting back at this point. Gibson ends up getting tangled in a chain, and he drowns, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So a nearby destroyer is about to be attacked by a bomber. Farrier, Tom Hardy, he chooses to continue assisting the evacuation, even though he's not knowing if he's going to make it back to England due to his fuel gauge.
Yep.
The destroyer is sunk by the bomber, and the Moonstone boat goes to take aboard those in the water, including Alex, all those soldiers that we saw.
Yeah.
That were hiding from the Germans doing the target practice. And Cillian Murphy, the soldier, he starts helping as well. Even though this awful situation happened with George, he's come to his senses. He's helping now.
Mm-hmm.
Peter, the son, goes down to find, and then we finally see George. Well, we've seen, there's been moments of him going to see him, and then we see George sitting there, and he's got the bandage on his head, and we find out he's blind at this point. But at this point, he goes back and he sees that George doesn't make it. George dies.
Yeah, he died.
Unfortunately,
He yells at like the Harry Styles character, and he says, "Be careful with him." And he goes, "Mate, he's dead." And he goes, and there's that beat, there's that pause,
right?
And he still follows up. We'll still be careful with him, and it's a heartbreaking moment,
right? And but Murphy's character, he asks him if he'll be okay, and Peter doesn't say anything, and he says George will be fine, even though
it's
right. He doesn't want to tell him because he knows he's the one that did it.
Yeah, he didn't want to put that on him, especially knowing everything he had been through. Again, it was not intentional. Right. And right now, in the middle of them helping people, it was not something they needed to add to that situation.
Right.
So he's just like, no, he's going to be okay. And that was a very commendable moment from him. That was really, really good.
Most of the movie spent a lot of just action scenes or intense moments. There's very little character development in this movie. I don't think that's a bold statement. But we had to have, this was the one human moment in the movie, I could say. We're just the one softest moments, so to speak. So it was obviously George, he lost his life trying to help things out. But then Peter, thinking about the soldiers, well-being and the situation that was going on, I'm going to spare him of the pain of this right now, even though everybody knows that George is dead. So, let's see here. Farrier ends up shooting the bomber down, and it crashes, igniting the oil in the water. And Peter ends up pulling Tommy out of the water. So we're seeing the timelines intersect now.
Yes.
Finally.
Nolan with his timelines, man. He likes to mess around a little bit. Like, I remember there was a point, like, Cillian Murphy's character doesn't get a name in the film. He's just a shivering soldier. He's a shivering soldier. He doesn't get a name. So I remember seeing him and then seeing him somewhere else in the timeline. I'm like, oh, wait. Oh, so we're not linear. Okay. We're not linear. Okay. I got it.
Peter ends up pulling Tommy out of the water, and Farrier ends up reaching Dunkirk just as his fuel runs out.
Yeah.
He shoots down a dive bomber about to attack the boat, and the troops cheer him on. He lands and burns the plane to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. And he just sits to wait to be captured by the Germans. So he makes it in an intense scene of that plane
was so good.
Landing. And, he finally takes his mask off that had been covering him almost the entire movie.
The whole movie, his face is covered. And, it was, again, there's not really a protagonist in the film. You just have a bunch of soldiers trying to survive. And in these final moments, Farrier felt like, okay, that's the hero we're rooting for right now. Like, in this situation, that's the guy we're rooting for. Because, again, he has no fuel. So he's basically just gliding, trying to do everything he can. He's already decided he's not going to make it back to England. He's already sacrificed that. And he's made it his mission that this is what he's going to do. He's going to reach Dunkirk and save as many of those soldiers as he possibly can. And he does it. And there's this real peaceful calmness to this whole moment, because the plane is literally gliding. The propeller is no longer spinning. And the way the score is playing and the way the sunset is hitting, like, it's a very calm, and it's almost as if, like, okay, it's over, and he's come to that realization that this is it, and he just lands, and just the way Nolan films it and frames it, and then only for him to have to burn the plane so it isn't taken in, and then he gets captured, and it's that moment where it's like, man, like that's the guy, like he gets that heroic shot where he's just standing there and you see the plane on fire, and it's the cameras behind him and whatnot, and he just has that very heroic moment that he was able to do that. Again, he could have turned around at any point to try to make it back to England. He made it. Nope, that's not what we're gonna do. It was a very heroic moment for Farrier.
I liked it because we didn't know if he was going to make it,
Mm-mm.
and he makes it, and it's just, I mean, just Tom Hardy, man, just
Yeah, dude. Like,
takes the mask off, and then Nolan with the zoom, it's like it's pulling back. We see him set the plane on fire, and the score swelling. It's a really cool moment.
yeah.
We find out 300,000 men are evacuated,
Mm-hmm.
and Commander Bolton stays to oversee the evacuation of the French. The boat, led by Mr. Dawson, it arrives back in Weymouth, and Cillian Murphy's character, he sees that George's body is being carried away, and
Mm-hmm.
him and Dawson, they exchange a glance. Peter, the son, arranges for a local reporter to publish a story of George's role in the evacuation because he helped.
Yeah.
Up until that scuffle, he was helping things out. Tommy and Alex, they board a train, and thinking that they might be encountered with hostile people, they get a hero's welcome when it
Yeah.
arrives at their destination.
They were so worried. Like,
Yeah.
well, Harry Styles' character was so worried. They were like, "Keep your head down, like don't."
Right.
And they were met with like rejoice, and it was just like, "Oh wow!" And they're handing them drinks, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh," like they weren't expecting it at all.
Right. It was like, yeah, it's done. It's over with.
Yeah. Yep.
Time to celebrate. Um, and then Tommy ends up reading Churchill's address on Dunkirk, and that's our movie.
It is the fastest moving Nolan film in
Yeah.
his filmography. It moves quick. Again, to me, it felt like a Nolan 3-hour film, but you're only watching the last hour and 40 minutes. Like that's what it felt like. Cause again, you're kind of
Yeah.
just thrown in with them. And I really did enjoy that experience. I know a lot of people came at it to a certain degree for saying like not enough character development. But then I did some reading and I was like, oh, it's actually really, really like it's critically acclaimed. A lot of fans liked it. I just remember hearing people going like, oh, there's not that much character development. But I don't think that's what Nolan's intention was. He was so focused on this certain point in history and he wanted to concentrate on that, and I give him credit for that because again he went run in, like you hit the ground running and you don't stop. I told you earlier that if I had one word to describe this film, it's grip, because I feel like the movie has a grip on us from beginning to end and it doesn't let us go until the final few moments. But it's very different. It's very different from any other Nolan film that we've got previously to this. Again, there are characters with no names. There are characters
Yeah.
whose names you never hear, but just there was something about it that felt great. Again, it was another experience, if you will.
It was based upon a true event,
Mm-hmm.
but the entire movie is original. That's what's,
Yes.
because it's not like he had dialogue to go off of or
Mm-mm.
memoirs or anything like that. It's just based upon the events. So people call it an original movie just based on true events.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, because up until now, and a lot of people say this to a fault, Nolan didn't have character development as
Mm-hmm.
far as characters in this movie. I felt he had character development in other movies. Some people disagree with that,
Yeah.
but I do feel like he does have character development, just not in all of his movies. This one, no,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
we talked about this off the air. A lot of the leads, they were virtual unknowns at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and it's an army, so everyone's wearing almost the same thing, so it's interchangeable, the names of these characters and such. And
Mm-hmm.
the big name characters, they're just playing these key roles,
Yeah.
that we will get to here. Kenneth Branagh, Mark Rylance, Tom Hardy, but the main focus is on the young soldiers who
Yeah.
are mostly virtual unknowns. And the way the movie is shot is just so intense. We're just shifting back and forth.
Yes.
You know, we're on the moonshine. We're in the little vessel with all the soldiers. We're in Farrier's plane as he's overhead. We have the soldier who's trying to escape from,
Yeah.
from the plane that crashed. It's a lot of intensity, and I think the score had a lot to do with it, for
Loved the
sure.
score. Loved
Yeah.
it. I saw it in IMAX and it was so loud. I remember telling someone, I was like, I felt like I was in a war, man. I was like, the sound design is fantastic. It's so loud. You feel like you're there. The score was great. And like you said, I think that it's like whether you want to say that in other films Nolan doesn't have character development, I think that's up to the viewer. Obviously, I disagree. I think there's plenty of films where he has great character development. We just talked about Interstellar, and I thought that had great character development. But this was one of those films where I felt like that was a deliberate choice. There are often times where we'll see something in a movie and go, "Oh, why was this way?" And a director may come on and say, "Well, that was actually intentional." I feel like Nolan didn't have to say that. You can tell that this was about a singular event. He wanted to focus on that event. And again, Nolan doesn't miss because he made sure that a lot of the things that he did were practical so you could feel them. Again, I could feel them in these scenes. You got these dog fights, these aerial shots that are just magnificent. So you know there's a guys up there flying. You know Nolan is down there with the camera in the water trying to get these ships capsizing and whatnot. And these scenes are very, very intense because the theme of the movie was just like survival. Like it's just survival. And we're witnessing a large group of people just trying to survive. We see the mentality of guys willing to sacrifice others for their own survival and people that are just so scared to go forward. And you have other people who want to be heroes. Like there's a lot to take away from it. And I agree with you that I do think that he had like his regulars like Cillian Murphy, Tom Hardy, those people to play certain key characters to sprinkle in every now and then. But we're really following the young soldiers. That's who we're following. And I 100% think it was deliberate. I don't think it was something that he missed. I don't think he wrote this script and was like, yeah, we just forgot to get it. No, I think it was intentional. And this is one of those movies that I feel like a good portion was literally shot with nothing but the storyboards. Like I would not be surprised if there were days where there was no dialogue whatsoever. He's looking at his storyboards. He goes, "Hey guys, this is what we planned for the day. This is what we're going to shoot." Because again, it's so focused on the action itself. And I don't mean action just as in gunfire and gunplay. I just mean like camera action, working, and setting up all your things and shots and whatnot. So I think everything was done deliberately and it looks great. The movie looks fantastic. And a lot of it comes because of that practicality.
All right, so let's look at the budget here. It's listed anywhere between 82.5 to 150 million. There's no exact amount. So that's what's
Okay.
listed under Wikipedia. Once again, Nolan makes the money back and more. In the box office, 527 million.
Yeah.
So Warner Brothers is loving Nolan at this point.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether it's low budget or higher budget, he's making back and then some. I heard a general rule of thumb is double the budget and then some due to the marketing, but he's
Yeah.
doing that consistently, time and time again. Something that came out, not reports, but reviews and such, when this movie came out, at this point in time, Nolan's been nominated for a lot of awards over the years. He keeps getting like technical awards at the Oscars, but he's not really getting just that recognition of director or best picture. He got Inception got a best picture. I think he got a best screenplay for Memento and such, but his movies aren't getting the recognition from the awards like they should be, even though worldwide he's getting just worldwide fanfare, from the
Yeah.
fans, the box office, and so on and so forth. So let's take a look here. Dunkirk ended up winning 2 Oscars. It won for Best Sound Mixing and Best Film Editing, so 2 technical awards.
Yeah.
It missed out on 3 others, so 5 total, but the 3 that it missed out on was Best Sound Editing.
Okay.
Nolan finally got his Best Director nomination. It's his
Good.
first time. And then he missed out on Best Picture again. So he was originally nominated for Inception. Now this is his second movie. Best Picture. let's take a look at the best director. So Guillermo del Toro won for Shape of Water.
Okay.
And the other nominations were Nolan for Dunkirk, first time nominee Jordan Peele for Get Out.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have Greta Gerwig for Lady Bird.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Paul Thomas Anderson for Phantom Thread.
Okay.
So those were the directors. Let's take a look at Best Picture. Shape of Water ended up winning Best Picture. So Del Toro got his director and, Best Picture win there. The other nominees were Call Me By Your Name, Darkest Hour, Dunkirk, Get Out, Lady Bird, Phantom Thread, The Post, and 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri.
Okay.
So a lot of nominees. It was a toss-up this year for who would win. There was speculation about Shape of Water. There was speculation about Dunkirk. I had heard some things about Darkest Hour and such, but everything. Actually, no. 3 Billboards. I heard a lot about 3 Billboards.
That one was the one I remember. Yeah. I was like, all right, I have to see this. There's a lot of chatter with Oscar buzz around that movie.
Yeah, but unfortunately, Nolan, the movie won a couple Oscars, but he definitely didn't. This ended up being his only Best Director nomination so far.
That's crazy to me. Like, it's so wild to me.
Yeah, he's making these incredible movies, and it's not happening. So it's 5 different nominations where Nolan's directly nominated here. So Best Original Screenplay, Memento. Best Original Screenplay, Inception. Best Picture, Inception. Best Director, Dunkirk. And Best Picture, Dunkirk. So although his movies have won Oscars, Christopher Nolan does not hold an Oscar yet. It's a travesty, isn't it?
We have seen it with other actors and other directors where for whatever reason the Oscar escapes them, and we always wait for that one time where it's going to come through. It's going to happen for Nolan. I don't know what it's going to be. Right. I don't know when it's going to be, because again, he's got a terrific lineup in his filmography that I'm surprised that it hasn't happened yet. I'm surprised that he hasn't been nominated more. So I'm constantly shocked and surprised. So I don't know what it's going to take. He did a war movie. Usually war movies do really well when it comes to the Oscars. Many people would consider a war movie Oscar bait. They'd be like, oh, they got the war piece in there. They made sure to do that. And, he got the nominations, but it didn't happen, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I will say this. If there was anybody Nolan was going to lose out to, I wasn't mad about Guillermo del Toro.
I love Guillermo, yeah.
Because just a great filmmaker just over the years with genre films. And,
yes.
He's done action, he's done horror, and just to see him get recognized for just those practical effects that he's become to be known as somebody that uses them for Shape of Water as director and as Best Picture too. I was a little surprised at the Best Picture.
Yeah, I was like, they nominated for Best Picture, so that was another one. I was like, I have to watch it. And he's been an advocate and very loud for genre films and animation. So I've always been a big supporter of Guillermo del Toro. So I'm always rooting for Christopher Nolan, but I was also rooting for Guillermo as well. Like, there was a lot of names up there. I was rooting for Jordan Peele. Like, I was like, every one of these guys could take it, and I'll be extremely happy. Greta Gerwig, I'd be extremely like. There was so many talented people up there. I just constantly keep finding myself surprised that Nolan just hasn't gotten it yet.
Right. All right. So I would love to give the standouts in this cast, but it was kind of like a collaborative effort.
Yeah, it really is. Like, again, you're not with anybody long enough to really be like, yeah, like it's all over the place. It's very quick cut all over the place. And everyone is truly sharing this load. Everybody's all carrying it together.
Yeah. We have Barry Keoghan, a young Barry Keoghan as George.
Young Barry Keoghan.
Yeah. We have Kenneth Branagh as Commander Bolton. Cillian Murphy, his character name is Shivering Soldier.
That's it, bro. He doesn't get a name. I'm telling you, that's it.
Yeah, we have Mark Rylance as Mr. Dawson, Tom Hardy as Farrier, and just a slew of virtual unknowns um, as the other soldiers here. You know, Fionn Whitehead as Tommy, Tom Glencarney as Peter Dawson, Jack Loudon as Collins, Harry Styles as Alex, Anurin Barden as Gibson, um, James Darcy as Colonel Winnett, and so on and so forth. So many of these people have gone on to do things since this
Mhm.
movie. But once again, just it's really interesting that Nolan first leads virtual unknowns at the
Yeah.
time.
Yep. Because again, I think it was very, very, very deliberate, where he wanted people to focus on the events itself more so than the characters. They were moving pieces to help him tell this story. You know, if he wanted to, Cillian Murphy could have played a larger role, or Tom Hardy, or any, like he could have worked the story differently. You know what I mean? Because the event is real, but he made an original story within the event, so he could have done anything he wanted to. He could have contacted the biggest names, and everyone was always so eager to work with Nolan. He could have done it, but he cast some pretty much unknown to the general population and people who watch film. I didn't know who these people were, and I'd like to think I watched a lot of movies at the time,
Right.
and I had no idea who these people were, and it helped. It does help in certain aspects of film in general. So I think he did what he wanted to do.
If I could pick one setting where I felt the most connected to the people, and
Mhm,
the most, I don't want to say the most, the best acted scene, so to speak,
mhm.
it would probably be every time we had to go to Moonshine.
Yep.
And just Dawson, his son George, and the shivering soldier. Just there was a lot
Yes.
of drama going on between
Yeah.
them, and especially just that one scene where the son keeps running back up and says he's not doing good, and Nolan on purpose doesn't show us George
Mhm,
until much later on, and it's like, he's bleeding, it's really bad, we got to turn back, and Dawson's like, no, we can't go
mhm.
back, we have to help save as many people as we can. So I would say maybe those people were the ones there to connect to the audience. They were the only civilians in the movie, so probably.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree with you because everyone else's goal in the movie is just to survive. Like that's everyone else's goal is just survive. All the soldiers
Right.
want to get out, and then you have Farrier, which is save as many people as possible. But within Dawson's ship, you have Mr. Dawson, who is bent on saving as many people as possible. You have Barry's character, who wants to help people, who is now taken out, so he's hurt. And you have Peter, who's like, well, we have to go back, and he's like, no, we have to keep moving forward. And now Peter is also having to take care of him down below while also helping soldiers, and then making sure that Cillian Murphy's character doesn't know that he passed away. Like there's a lot happening on this ship, and it's wherever on that ship we're away from the war, but there's conflict within the ship, and I think it allowed us to have the most. I think that's the one setting that has the most dialogue. Is in that ship between those characters. I think they have more dialogue than everybody else in the movie.
Yeah. So we're gonna forego the notable lines that we normally go through here, because once
They'd
again,
be like 3 lines, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
there's hardly any
yeah,
dialogue in this thing.
yeah, it would probably be once again from the Moonshine, just everyone talking, and
Yep.
so we're gonna forego that, and we're gonna start wrapping things up here for Dunkirk. Um, but how do you feel about this movie now that some time has passed? And I don't know. I feel like had this won Nolan his best Oscar, for best picture or best director, maybe we'd be talking about this movie more.
Probably.
But I don't hear a lot of the public talk about this movie too much since it was released.
Yeah, this is the one Nolan film that I see mentioned the least. Again, I see Interstellar mentioned more. I've seen The Prestige mentioned more. I think it's because the style of filmmaking that went around Dunkirk. I think that again, it feels like an event film. There's not a lot to really grab onto outside of just the event itself. So I think for many people, it's probably a one and done type of situation. Like they saw it, they went through that, but there's nothing that really latches onto. Because like when we watch movies more than once, what we do is we latch on the characters and their stories. And this was a very basic story of just getting out. Like that's all it was, and it's shot amazing. It's beautiful. The sequences are intense. So there's a lot of that. But other than that, I think in comparison to his other filmography, there's just more to take away from those movies. There's more to take away from Interstellar. There's way more to take from Inception. There's more to take from the Dark Knight trilogy. There's so much more that you get out of those films. And I think because this movie was a very straightforward, just event film, that there's people don't pull as much from it. I remember watching it at IMAX and being blown away by the scope of things. Again, I love the way it's shot. I love the sequences. And then watching it, I think I probably only watched it 3 times, which is very, very low in comparison to how many times I've watched other Nolan films. You know what I mean? I don't think there's a Nolan film that I've watched less than 6 or 7 times. But when it comes to Dunkirk, I think this was probably my 3rd time watching. I think I watched it in IMAX. I watched it again at home, and then I watched it again for us to discuss it. So I think I've only seen it around 3 times. But every time I watch it, I'm taken back by how well executed it is. But I do think that for fans of Nolan, we can appreciate it. I think for the general public, they can appreciate it. But I think because of that intentional lack of character development, that it's just something that people just don't run to talk to as often, because again, there's not really much to talk about outside of the event itself. And because of that, I think it's why it's spoken the least out of all his filmography.
I wanted to show some love to maybe some of our favorite war movies off the top of our head here. Well, we talked about it a little bit here. I keep saying that war movies really aren't my thing, but then I started listing off the ones I could just remember from the past that I've seen. And I remember seeing Apocalypse Now, and I know it's not really a war movie, but it is based in a war. And I thought that was a really unique movie here. That was in 1979. In 1998, Saving Private Ryan came out, and for a lot of people, that's the standard since it was released. There's such an intense movie. And then I really didn't pay attention to war movies as much. And then the 2010s hit, and there was a war movie like almost every year that I noticed here. We have Lone Survivor in 2013. 2014, we have 2 movies that I paid attention to. One was American Sniper, and the other was Fury, which we will talk about in a second here. And 2016, we had Hacksaw Ridge. And then in 2019, we had 1917, the incredible war movie done in one shot. And so just reasons for these movies to stand out here. Any war movies come to mind to you, Ricardo?
Instantly, like you said, Saving Private Ryan. I remember when I was in acting class, picking a monologue from Saving Private Ryan, and I had a lot of fun just going through all the different monologues and see which one I wanted to do. And I ended up doing one from Giovanni Ribisi's character about trying not to fall asleep and trying to stay awake. But there was something about Saving Private Ryan, and like you said, I think to many people they consider it the best. It's Steven Spielberg doing what he does best. Huge scope, and amazing ensemble cast. And that's a movie that I saw relatively recently. I think I saw it this year, and just being blown away by it again. And just, it's an emotional film. So Saving Private Ryan will always stand up and stand out amongst so many. It's probably my favorite. If I really sat there and thought about it, it probably is my favorite. I think I've seen it the most out of all war movies, and it's the one that probably hits me the hardest. I mean, majority of war movies are very emotional films, because obviously they're usually based on real events, and when that happens, you can't help but just think about all the servicemen who had to go through what they went through during those times. But Saving Private Ryan is a big one. You mentioned 1917. I absolutely love that movie because of the execution, where it's all shot as in one continuous take, and I thought that was magnificent. I was also a big fan of All Quiet on the Western Front. That one was a really good one. I just we saw that for Oscar season last year. It got nominated for Best Picture, so I was like, "Why? Absolutely, I got to see that one." That was another one that was great. Hacksaw Ridge, man, Hacksaw Ridge. Incorporating a man's faith into war and whatnot, and how that was going to do. That one was another one that hit really, really big with me. I remember seeing in theaters Lone Survivor. I saw that in theaters. That was another one that I really enjoyed. Again, a hard one to watch. I talked to you before where I said that's one of those movies that I think I've only seen twice, because again, We're talking about things based on actual events, and anytime you explore that, you explore the the lives of real people, and just the title says it, lone survivor. Watching that movie that not everyone's going to make it out, and it's hard to watch knowing that happened. But yeah, I would say those ones stand out. Fury, man.
Oh man.
Fury from David Ayer, arguably outside of his work with Training Day and whatnot. This is probably my favorite movie from David Ayer, Fury. You had a fantastic cast, just brilliant acting, and just he nailed everything about it that I wanted to see from that movie. Fury is a huge standout in his filmography, and it's one of my favorites.
The thing about Fury is that it does a really good job of humanizing the soldiers.
Yeah.
And, the thing about, well, war is just an awful thing, obviously.
Mhm. Yeah.
And it's all about, well, you're a soldier now. That's why everyone wears a uniform.
Mhm.
Who you are, it matters. But in the grand scheme of things, we're all united against the enemy, whatever side you're on. That's what war is. And what Ayer did with Fury was he humanized everybody in that he gave them each a backstory, and they all share parts of their backstory as the movie goes along. It's an incredible watch, and that's what hits me about Fury. But I don't know. I might need to stop saying that war movies really aren't my thing, because every couple years or so something comes out and it catches my eye.
Yeah,
So
war. The idea of war movies, like again, like they're difficult because again, majority of these war movies, unless they're like super fictionalized war film, they're based on events, and it's when you dip into that territory, it can be very emotional, very heavy. So sometimes for some people, for different reasons, might be like, I'm not really into war movies. Like I have family that don't like them. They're like, I don't want to watch them because I'm gonna get too sad. I'm gonna get emotional for whatever reason. I don't want to get in there. You know what I mean? Which is completely understandable. There are certain films that I'm like, I don't think I'm ready for that just yet. Maybe in some time. But yeah, I don't think you're wrong for saying you're not into war films, but at the same time, there are some war films that you truly appreciate, and that's great. And that's a testament to the filmmaking. There are some people that probably go, I don't like horror films. There are probably some people like, I don't like comic book films, but then they'll watch The Dark Knight and go, oh, but I like that one. And they're like, I don't like comic book films, but I like the Dark Knight trilogies because it did something that spoke to them. So probably in the same essence where like, it's okay. You probably think like, oh, maybe I'm not really into war films that much, but every once in a while, a war film comes out that you can appreciate as someone who loves film and that type of thing and go, you know what, though? I do enjoy those ones.
right. And we'll give some closing thoughts here. To that extent, while I agree that Dunkirk is a very well-made film, it is an
Mm-hmm.
amazing film. On a personal level, is not one of my personal favorites from Nolan.
Yeah, it's
It's
not. Again, we're
so
talking about an all-you-can-eat buffet where everything
right.
on there is good. It just happens to be, you know, just
Yeah,
down there a little bit.
exactly. It's a
You know what I
well-made
mean?
film. He's a
Yeah.
great filmmaker. It's an amazing film, just not one of my one of
Yeah.
my favorites, and
Yeah.
and that's okay. There's
Yeah.
some people that think it's his best film because of the way it was
Yes.
made,
I
you
read
know.
that today because I was reading on it and I was reading quotes from people and they were saying like it's their favorite Nolan film. And I was like, oh, that's fantastic. Some people said it's their favorite war film because they appreciated the idea that it wasn't focused on creating stories with characters. They wanted just to see the event. So there are some people that because of that, they actually appreciate it more. Where someone like myself and others might be like, oh, well, we kind of we like that character development. We like seeing that aspect of those characters. So, it's different for everybody.
All righty. Folks, that was the Panel Bros official breakdown for Christopher Nolan's movie, excuse me,
Yeah.
The Dunkirk.
The Dunkirk. Oh, and you get some great like Hans Zimmer music, The Dunkirk.
Yeah. That was the Panel Bros official breakdown for Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk. Please give us a like, share, and subscribe on YouTube at the Panel Bros. As always, we appreciate your subscribes because they increase our reach. Also, if you could please let us know how you felt about Dunkirk in the comments below. We are pushing along with our filmography of Christopher Nolan. Next up is Tenet.
Yes.
Another science fiction movie. So please stay tuned. That's next. For Ricardo Segura, this is Anderson Marchak saying, thank you for coming to the panel.